We're going to start the curriculum committee. It's Tuesday, June 4th at about 8 to 10. Just go around and take attendance. I'm Erin Dove, school board member.
Patty Schmidt, school board member.
Laura Jackson, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning.
Kevin High, Curriculum Coordinator.
Heidi Spindola, curriculum coordinator.
Jen Wimmer, superintendent.
Sharon Kalis, Director of Pupil Services.
Maybe it's just on. We'll just keep the lighting as is.
I'm fine
We're
with it.
saving energy.
Right. Okay.
So the first item on our agenda today is our annual at-risk plan. Each year before the students start the school year, the annual at-risk plan is approved by the full Board of Education. And we discussed it, and it went to the board for approval last July. So it's appropriate for the curriculum committee to review this and the other items on the agenda at this time. So Sharon, I have the at-risk plan up on the screen. If you would take us through it, please.
Sure. Based on the requirements, our goal is that every child can learn in the school district, and we have a variety of supports to make sure that that happens. The part of my role is really coordinating the services, mainly at the high school. At lower levels, we track potential at-risk through attendance. We believe our elementary children, the more they're there, the easier the learning will be. And when we start getting into the middle school level, we talk more about the learning profile of our students and providing some supports for them through additional instruction or support through the emotional behavior avenue with our counselors. A big part of that is engaging the family. And one of the changes that I've documented is that there needs to be multiple contacts with families when kids are at risk. Previously, they had a format that had more paperwork involved with it than sitting at the table and having those conversations with families. So I incorporated in our flow chart of what they have to be done. There's more contact with kids, especially at the high school level, when parents' interest or involvement with kids sometimes lessens rather than increases. So starting on our professional development days in June, the high school counselors are going to be documenting and creating some of those documents to ensure that families have face-to-face contacts or virtual, which is much easier for families to engage. At the high school level, there are different opportunities each year, and we're doing some restructuring with the at-risk program at the high school. So I have included some of those changes in the documentation, and that would be, beginning on page 2, some of the at-risk options for high school kiddos. And that's still a work in progress, but I know we're going to be providing more supports in the area of English language arts and in math. And having our high school teachers who are content experts support our kids who are struggling. The other change, the third change in this had to do with the GO2 program. They wanted to make sure in the GO2 program, which is the program where kids are on site for classrooms and they're also involved with a job and teaching some of the soft skills. We had to make sure that those students receive the same diploma as any other student, and it's by default in West Bend because we only have one diploma, but per the GO2 standards, we had to have that statement in our at-risk plan. So other than that, there are no changes, and like I said, things are in flux at the high school, and we will keep you updated with those changes as they come around. Is there any questions? Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Kids that are in like a foster system, for
Mhm.
example, and when they turn 18, do they, I know they're not, like, I know we must bridge some sort of gap between when they're considered an adult and before they graduate high school, if they turn 18 before they finish school, we can talk about this another maybe, but is that something that is addressed too?
When they're 18 and there's no family involvement? Is that what you're
Yeah.
asking? If they're
Well, yeah,
in the foster system?
yeah.
I mean, we have a liaison through DCI, we have to have a liaison for homeless and liaison for foster care. So we are connected with those foster families, but I don't.
It doesn't necessarily go by their birthday, just like as
Okay.
if you had your own senior turn, it gives them some additional rights. So they might be able to sign themselves out of school, things of that nature, but their placement would be through the end of the school year or sometimes beyond. And then they have transitionary supports. I would have to familiarize myself with our county, but it was always, whatever that transitionary plan was, there would be a plan of support for the family. So it's not a birth date
Yeah.
and then done.
Then they're kind of, yeah.
Right.
Okay, good, I'm just curious about that in general,
Mhm.
but that's probably for another,
Yes.
another time.
Any other questions on the AtRisk plan? The next item on our agenda is the annual parental notice of academic standards. And with this notice, the requirement by the state is that at the first board meeting of the new school year, so the first board meeting in July, the board has to approve the annual notice to parents of the academic standards that will be in place that school year. So it's very similar to what you've seen over the last several years. The difference is the state has just approved the 2021 Wisconsin standards for mathematics. Those will be under review during the year, and as the math curriculum team is conducting a review of our math program, they'll be looking at the new standards to see how well aligned we are to the new standards. So we have not brought those forward to the board for approval yet, but both are listed for the annual parental notice because both will be in play during the year. The other change is that we had the same thing in last year for ELA, but if you recall earlier this year, you approved the ELA standards, so the old standards are no longer listed there. These standards then, of course, are the ones that are utilized as we're planning instruction and as our students are being assessed during the course of the school year. Do you have any questions about the annual parental notice? This will, after it's approved by the board in July, it would then be put on the district website for parents to access. The next item on our agenda is the literacy, our comprehensive model for literacy and learning. And if you, in 2019, the board approved us moving forward with a comprehensive literacy approach. And the model that we selected is aligned with our philosophy of continuous improvement. And the aspects of the literacy model are research-based and about good instruction in general. It applies to all of our curricular areas, and it's tied in, as you'll see, through our curriculum plan. As such, we are shifting to call it our comprehensive model for literacy and learning. And because it does apply across all content areas, it is solid instruction that is research-based. And so you'll see it referenced as that. If you go to the end of your packet, you'll see it looks very much like the AtRisk plan. You'll see the draft of the annual curriculum plan. About halfway through that, you'll see the comprehensive literacy and learning plan. And it has the same heading with the red bar from our continuous improvement plan on learning. it about halfway through. Heidi, I'm gonna let you take it away, and you let me know if you want me to open that up.
Okay. So as you know, as Laura just referenced, we have been implementing now for roughly 2-ish years, with one being our research year and last year being our true implementation year. With the pandemic, we didn't hit all of our goals, so we did kind of a review revise for this year's goals. And then with kind of that need to go slow to go fast as a result of the pandemic, we had some review and revise to this year's goals as well. The biggest area for celebration from this year was in the area of what we call language workshop for our K-8 ELA teachers. And this practice is something that we really worked hard to get implemented across all of those classrooms. It utilizes common text, typically picture book type text, for each grade level that are based upon themes that connect to social studies. And we were very excited to be able to have the practices that go along with that, such as a lot of turn and talk for students, very specific prompts for writing, those types of things. The anecdotal feedback of teachers has been they cannot believe the level of vocabulary use that students have picked up from looking at these books. They are very excited about their ability to turn and talk and have deep conversations and reference other texts in ways that they weren't previously doing, and that their writing about their reading has really deepened their comprehension overall as a whole. So very excited about that. And that really ended up being our main focus this year because of the pandemic and just needing to balance all the other things that were on the plate, especially earlier on in the school year. So next year, as far as our plan goes, we have really honed in on making sure that we're doing some of the best practices that we had hoped to get to this year for all content areas into next school year. So that work is really going to be grounded around the gradual release of responsibility for all teachers. So making sure that students have opportunities each day to have some whole group instruction as well as some small group practice time or small group instruction, and then individual practice time where they're getting feedback from their teachers through conferring and those types of practices. Really helping to make sure that students are having opportunities to practice their skills in front of their teachers, getting that immediate feedback, and making sure we're taking that outside of just our literacy block and into our larger instructional frameworks as a whole. So those will be some of our big pieces that we're going to work on next year with all teachers. In addition, as you know, we have model classroom teachers. They came and spoke to the board last, I think it was June, they came and spoke. And that was really something that was really powerful for our system. They kind of served as our lead learners for any of our work, and then teachers had the opportunity to go in and visit their classroom sites. With the pandemic, we weren't able to leverage that practice this year, but we're very excited to hopefully get back to that next year, should our pandemic levels stay stable and we are able to see different sites. The exciting news with that, though, is we went from just one model classroom per site to typically about 3 model classrooms per site, which is very exciting. So teachers have opportunities to see their peers within their same building, not needing to travel across sites, all of those pieces, which is just going to help to strengthen our overall program. We have also started to do some work this year that is going to lead into next year as well in helping our literacy specialists who have a role in coaching their peers, as well as our instructional coaches who obviously are coaches as well, bringing those 2 groups of professionals together to really support all teachers as the system. That work has been really powerful. They have spent a lot of time actually down in this room with me, specifically around our unit development process, which kind of leads to our next part in this plan. Is next year we're hoping to implement our new units of study, which we have begun talking about over the past couple of months. Those are aligned to the social studies component so that students have some opportunities for cross-content transfer, which is huge for them. And then our curriculum teams have been working with a literacy specialist or instructional coach at each of our grade levels, K-8 for ELA, to get those units written. So they each have kind of that one go-to person that is assigned to their group, and then I continue to support all of the groups as a whole. So that would kind of be the final portion of our plan next year for new implementation in that realm. Am I missing anything that I should have discussed, Laura, that we have previously discussed?
Just to walk you through this a little bit, the front matter, you'll notice, has remained pretty consistent. And the specifics for 21-22 begin on page, I don't know if it's 7, this page 5. And I think that the working with all coaches and coordinators on the unit development process was really important because as we begin our work in any curricular area, that leadership will be consistent in how they work with different curricular teams. Our administrators have and will continue to be versed in that and have been invited to attend the trainings for different curricular groups that they work with.
I have a question about that. I know a couple months ago, there was a textbook that was recommended that the teachers didn't, that there was the opportunity in the process for the teachers to review and give feedback, and then some of them were surprised when their choice wasn't selected. Do they, I guess, how clear is it what there's, I'm sure, multiple factors in the rubric. Do they know what the process is, so
Yeah.
that isn't such a shock?
So in fact, that group has been down here and is
Okay.
working on understanding their units of study as we move forward and going through that process. I've not brought that forward to the full board for approval yet because I need to ensure that the teachers understand their units of study better before we do.
And in addition, I believe it was March when we approved when your team approved the ELA standards. And at that point, Jen gave an overview of the curriculum development process here in the district, that we really kind of start with our standards, and then we kind of work backwards to like build our curriculum, and then that last tip of the pyramid being identifying our resources. So we're actually not even really at that point yet. And what the teams have identified through this process is they are finding resources that we already have in the district and leveraging high yield strategies and things, but making it in a more systematic way versus needing to buy like another program or another textbook type of thing. So at this point, the teams are feeling like they're able to meet their goals grounded in their standards and what students need to know and be able to do to support the curriculum that they've started to identify with things that we already commonly have. So that's very exciting for them as well.
And so as you're talking about a specific grade level, and we're talking K-8.
Right.
Yeah, so for literacy, I think they are all, we've hit some bumps in the road because it's a brand new process, right? Anytime you learn something new, it always takes a little time to learn a new process, but overall it's been going very well. And I personally feel that our teams have done a tremendous job really being dedicated and staying true to their standards, which is awesome work.
And everyone knowing what the process is.
Yes.
Is
Mhm.
important to establish expectations.
Yes.
And have fewer surprises.
Right. And then in the June PD days that are coming up for professional learning, our teams will be highlighting what they have developed for Unit 1 with their peers, where they're at in the process so far. So they'll be giving their peers who are not part of those curriculum teams an overview of the process they've been going through as well, so that everyone in the system, K-8 with literacy, including our special education staff, would have that overview at that time as well.
And on that day, the group that you're referencing also will be working with their inquiry students.
Who develops the process? Exactly.
The curriculum development,
Yeah.
well, it's outlined in our board policies, and then, and we have built in the specifics in order to fully develop our staff to participate in that. So we, I can't tell you specifically when the district shifted to an understanding by design as a structure, which is a model for instructional planning and teaching and learning. And at that time, the entire staff was trained in it. As we're regrounding in our approach, we're retraining people in that because it's been in the system for, like I said, I can't tell you when. It's sort of
Was it
around
before you
8,
came?
yeah.
Okay.
And so as part of this process, just regrounding in our procedures, our intention, and the why behind this, because it's effective practice. And again, starting with the standards assess that, what are the key learnings for students, and building from there. So it's a process that's been defined within the system.
And it's not uncommon, the UDL process is real common in school districts and at the university level.
So just like, I want to super simplify it. We go from standards to curriculum to units of study, and then find the resources to get to those units of study. It's not, we're not teaching to the resources, we're teaching to the units of study.
I will say the teams, when they're down, they got to hole up with me down here in the boardroom for a couple days. It was really good work, really hard work, and at the end, every day I had them do a share about some of their biggest learning. And the teams that were here, and again, they were the ELA teams, K through 8, they were, they gave very positive feedback. They felt that this was the best they'd ever known their standards. Somebody even went so far as to say, I feel really bad for the rest of my team that's not here because I don't feel they're gonna have the same depth of understanding that I've had going through this process. So they were definitely finding value in it, despite it being heavy lifting work and heavy mental work. But I think as a system, we are really moving in the right direction to be responsive to our students.
What's the plan to, and I get those other teachers that weren't here,
Yeah.
you know, time and money and all of that, they can't immerse that heavily maybe in it, but how do we get them up to where the other teachers are and get to, so they can reflect on that too?
Right, so that is going to be part of professional learning plan for next week, Tuesday, on the 8th. All of the teams will do some work with their standards that are specific to this quarter to do some of the same type of reflective work that our ELA teams, our unit development teams went through, so that we have that common grounding before they dive into what their actual unit is, so that they can have that deep understanding of their standards as well. Because I can't be in one place all at the same time, or in multiple places all at the same time. I haven't finished my coffee. And we know that we want to be targeted to the grade level teams. The unit of study teams, I will be developing their presentation, providing them with what they need to do that. And then they, as well as a literacy specialist or instructional coach, will be leading each grade level team across the system. And then I will travel between them all and support them. So they will be able to support their peers in that regard.
So as we look at individual social studies courses, the teams have also met down here to go through that, the same processes. This summer, as we are continuing some curricular work in progress, so for example, the meteorology class, the teams that are working through this summer will also, again, walk through the process so that that's applying across the subject areas. And as we continue to move forward with reviewing and revising curriculum on a schedule, that same thing will occur. So it's like just in time as you're looking at your standards, as you're looking at, we'll continue, but all of the language in the system will be uniform.
Any other questions?
I'm just glad that this is something that you're working on, because when people understand why they're teaching what they're teaching, I feel like it's just better, it's easier to work every day.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So the work will continue into the summer. The teams will have some identified summer curriculum days, and then as well into next school year. So it'll be an ongoing process that will keep you updated on.
We'll move on then to our title programs. This is just an informational piece, just to revisit the title programs that we have in the district. And we provide, our district has the obligation of working with our private schools within the system as well on their title program. And this includes 4 different areas of title services. Title I being for our students who are living in poverty and to improve their outcomes in reading and math instruction. Currently, we have 5 schools that are title. and that would be Greentree, Fair Park, McLean, Silverbrook, and Badger. And our threshold is, you have to be 29% of your students living in poverty or above. And so those are our district schools that qualify for Title by meeting that threshold. So at each of those schools, they receive additional dollars from the federal government in the area of, to improve outcomes in reading and math instruction. And so as a system, we prioritize getting services to our individual students in those areas. So a lot of our Title I budget covers staffing to get additional staff in there to address any gaps in learning. Our private schools can access Title I services, and what we're required to do each year is 15% of our federal dollars go to the private schools in the West End boundaries to serve Title students in attending private schools. And they then identify if they want to accept the services or not. Title II is about attracting and retaining highly qualified teachers and administrators. So it really focuses on professional development and making sure that you can do things to retain the teachers specifically and principals, administrators specifically, but also to retain the quality of them. Title III is about improving outcomes for our students who are learning English and who are proficient in another language and are learning English as they're going through school. And Title IV is probably the most eclectic of titles. We have utilized a lot of our Title IV dollars for our SEL curriculum. It's about keeping students safe online and mental health, social emotional learning. And that's primarily where we've spent our Title IV dollars. Our private schools, this is their collaboration form that they're asked to fill out. And we spend time with them as a whole group and then as individual, with individual principals and individual leaders at their site in order to administer the federal dollars, but also help the students in their instruction, help them plan their improvements for students and staff.
I was gonna add that the dollar amount for the private schools is based on where their children live, where their students live, so they goes through one of our support staff, so she collects all the addresses, so if they have, 6 kids from McLean, or, 6 kids from Greentree, then that dollar amount is calculated for them. And what's unique in our system, Laura doesn't have the historical part about it, that Decorah is no longer a school that receives title programming, and McLean is. So that's a shift in, this community where our kids of poverty are residing.
The Title I plan within your packet is what each of our title principals works with their team on for Title I services specifically. And so you have a copy of the Title I plan. And they're each cited it may be their leadership team, it may be a unique team. But the plans are consistent with their school improvement plans, and then drive the actions that they're doing within their site in order to help students in reading and instruction. Family engagement is a component of Title I and Title III, and can be a component of Title II as well. Again, Title I being focused on students in poverty.
When you were talking about the private schools, that was just Title I, or is that all?
They have the
all?
option to participate in all 4.
Okay.
And in the last several years, we have not had any of the schools have qualifying students in the area of Title III. So the private schools have not utilized their Title III dollars, which is in regards to EL learners. I know one of our schools will be accessing those services for next year, one of our private schools. The 15% of the budget, the federal allocation that is then taken and administered to the private schools is divided amongst the private schools based on the number of students they have that qualify for those services.
But it's 15% no matter whether the private schools have 5 kids that need it or 50 kids that need it?
Correct. They get a per pupil allocation. So if school A has 5 kids, if the per pupil is $10, they get $50. And if school B has 50 kids, then they get $500. It's a per pupil allocation to the site. Now, if school C takes nothing, says they don't want services, then they don't, the 15% is then divided amongst A and B, so their per pupil allocation goes up. We have a few schools that don't accept any services, and we have one that accepts only Title II. Oh, now Title II and Title IV, excuse me.
So school C doesn't accept the services. They still count the number of students that would get it and give it to A and B?
No, so if the total dollar amount is, say, $1,000,
There's like a budgeted amount for.
Yes.
Okay.
So if instead of that $1,000 being divided amongst 2 schools or 3 schools, it's divided amongst 2.
Okay, that makes more sense. Okay.
Then the per pupil allocation, because now it's only divided amongst 2, will rise.
Right, okay. So the budgeted amount stays the same because that's calculated by the number of students that.
Total, just,
Yeah.
it's just
Okay.
total dollar.
And whether those kids were in our district, or that are in our district, or they went to the public school or the private school, is that budgeted amount the same? It's just distributed differently?
The per pupil allocation is different.
Okay,
The per pupil allocation is different. So for our schools within the district, we can decide what that per pupil allocation per student is.
oh,
And then it's divided amongst, so Braintree, the number of students that they have living in poverty times the per pupil allocation.
oh, so our district determines the per pupil allocation?
For our sites.
Okay,
But
for
there,
our
yeah,
site.
there's,
For
DPI has a
ours.
portal, there's a mathematical process you have to go
Okay,
through.
I was gonna say,
So
I'm
we-
shocked that
we-
DPI doesn't tell
Yeah.
us how we calculate this.
So there's a rank ordering of the schools
Mhm.
by percentage of kids in poverty. And you choose what they are, but there's lots of rules to follow.
Yep.
So if like if Green Tree is the highest, then the next school has to be at least, is it a penny or a dollar?
It's at least a penny less.
Yeah, so there are some formula things that you have to follow. So it's not really that random.
Right, okay,
There is a structure that DPI
yeah.
provides.
But then for the private schools, is that also, does that also
Well, they have a
follow?
set dollar amount.
Yeah, so they take out that dollar amount and then there's a per pupil amount, so
Based
that's all
on the-
decided in this mathematical.
Is the
formula.
set dollar amount formulated by the DPI?
It is, and what so we put in the number of students living in poverty in our district that are from that list of addresses that the private school gave us. So
Okay,
private school gives us their list of students who are by address, not by name.
Right.
And then our assistant determines, based on boundaries, if that student is attending a school that qualifies for title services. Then that, so if they give us 100 kids and 50 are within our attendance area, that 50 will be put in. So then that number of students is then put into the DPI portal. All the addresses are that number is what, how many that school A gets. School B might get 10, right?
Okay.
Then that 15% dollar, that whatever that dollar amount is divided amongst all those private school kids. So if there's 57, if there's 102, it will divide that same 15% equally amongst all those kids.
Okay. Okay, I'm starting to picture how this happens. So there's like a DPI program and we feed them
Yep.
the addresses, because I'm like, who has to figure this out for us? This, I mean, that's a significant,
Yeah.
task.
So we're really putting in numbers and
Addresses.
addresses, and
Okay.
it's doing all of the calculation. And
Okay.
so there's not, we're not really handpicking how much each one.
Yeah.
It's all.
Okay, okay, thanks. Yeah, that's.
Other questions about title services? So we utilize our title services and our title program to support and remain consistent with all of our processes in the district. Shifting to the draft of the curriculum plan, in August, again, we did it last year in July, but before the first day that students attend, we asked that the board approve the annual curriculum plan. And so you've seen this every August, last year in July, and we're just running through a draft of it. Excellence for All is our district mission, and that, if I pull up the policy 310, you'll see the instructional goals. I'm sorry, it's our district vision, excuse me. So policy 310 lays out from the board what our mission is, our vision, and our core values. And then the guiding philosophy of continuous improvement. You will see all of these things woven throughout the curriculum plan. You heard it in the plan for literacy and learning. And you'll see it throughout here. Policy 311 describes how performance objectives are written for the system. Policy 330 talks about curriculum development, and policy 343.6 talks about instructional planning. The whole 300 series is about instruction in the system. So there's homework, there's the Title I policy, there's policies on at-risk and students with IEPs, there's a policy for English language learners. I'm just highlighting these 5 during the curriculum plan discussion. You've seen the comprehensive literacy and learning implementation plan. This is a draft of the WBSD belief statements. This has been reviewed by all of our principals and our instructional coaches, and our, including literacy specialists, curriculum coordinators, Gabby has seen it. We have some updates to do based on feedback that we've gotten, but essentially it divides our instructional beliefs into 3 areas, one of those being instructional design and planning. And essentially it's what are the components of really strong instructional design and planning. And those elements are woven into the plan that you've heard, our discussion on the universal design for learning, and the understanding by design instructional model. Assessment and feedback is critical, a critical part of the process. It's described in the board policies that I've highlighted, what expectations for staff are around assessment of our learning and assessment for student learning. And then the next section is the actual act of learning and what is involved in that. Our curriculum plan includes the annual notice of standards. In the past, you have we've been able to review BYOC as the source for all of our where we house our course overview documents. And the course overview documents have the standards for each course and the units of study for each course. We'll be transitioning away from BYOC into a Google-based model that allows us to easily change in one section so that when the doc that's linked on Google is changed, it's changed on the website, so you don't have to find where did I miss it, is it linked, where is it linked, and all of that.
Thanks,
So.
Bill.
Easy part of it.
And less cost.
So we'll be transitioning to a Google-based format for that. And it will have one image K-8, and then 9-12 will have another one. Our course syllabi for our 9-12 courses will have all of the information needed on those course overview documents. And so that will be linked all on the website before we start school in the fall. When we talk about the overall curriculum plan, it includes our universal curriculum. So our Tier 1 curriculum, every child in this district is a Tier 1 student. They all should have access to the curriculum that is prescribed and developed for their grade level. Sometimes students need additional supports in order to access that curriculum, and sometimes students have excelled beyond that already and need an opportunity to continue their learning that is more advanced than what's prescribed at the grade level. And so that is where our equitable multi-tiered systems of support fall in. You've seen the annual AtRisk Plan as part of that. Our structure for serving gifted and talented students, our intervention at Tier 2 for both academics and behavioral needs, our college and career readiness plan and planning processes, and extended learning opportunities. So our extended learning opportunities run the whole gamut. That might be students who are taking courses at the college level. That might be students who are taking a blended approach to learning, some online, some in person. That would extended learning opportunities include our summer school program. And it's far-reaching, including project search at the various locations, serving students with disabilities at our older students with disabilities. You'll see that within the curriculum plan is our plan for professional development. In order to ensure that we're able to carry out the curriculum, we have to make sure our professionals are prepared and able to do that. And our professional development plan has to be linked into the instructional plan and what all of the needs are across the system. So the professional development plan includes each of these components. When we talk about our curriculum budget, the budget should be supporting everything that was just listed above that. And as we have certain things that are annual purchases. One example of that would be our Bridges math workbooks. Every year we purchase that, and so we plan for while we're using bridges, we're planning for that out of each year's budget. At the 6-8 level in science, our students use Amplify, so each year we're purchasing that subscription to Amplify. There are certain things that are just part of the annual budget, and then there are areas where we invest dollars in the initial implementation of things. Or as we're shifting to new textbooks or new resources, we're allocating dollars appropriately for that. So that's what this area of focus is. And so if we look, if you look at this document, the budget areas of focus does not include those annual purchases and those things that we do on an ongoing basis. It is, however, there are other curricular dollars. Where are we heavily going to focus those in instruction? And so you'll see that in 2021, when we're making purchases out of the curriculum budget, we'll be looking at these areas. You'll see health 1 year, because we'll want to extend our current resources in health 1 more year while we're doing our health review. And then next year, you'll see health new, because we'll be replacing that resource then for next year, but that won't be used with students until this calendar year, school year. So we will not put it in the budget until that year. Then we look at our professional development that will target those areas. So while our career pathways in our CTE and other areas will be an area of focus over the next 3 years as we're re-looking at our academic and career planning process. Social studies, again, we're going to have some ongoing things with that. So redeveloping our units of study in our areas of social studies, and then making sure that our instruction is aligned to those and people have the skills and knowledge necessary to be able to provide that instruction. When we talk about our instructional staff focus, again, these are the critical areas of our instructional staff focus over the next few years to allow us to do the things that are in the needs of our students and the expectations of our board and our community. We'll look at accountability. So I'm going to acknowledge right off the bat, I did not list every area of accountability on here. With our federal accountability, we also have our Office of Civil Rights data collections and things like that. I didn't list every area of accountability. And again, as part of the curriculum plan, I listed those that directly apply. So Office of Civil Rights data and other data collections collect information as a result of these increases. So we have our federal accountability, our state accountability, and our local accountability. And so this is how are we checking out to make sure that our curriculum plan is working. And again, then as we move forward through next year, these are the areas where we'll build in accountability measures locally. So our gradual release of responsibility instructional model, the assessment both of learning and the assessment for learning to guide our instruction, to assist students in becoming that independent learner. Our universal screening will be another accountability piece for us. Our student failure rates and our student achievement rates will continue to be pieces of local accountability. As we go and look at delivering our curriculum plan in the next the summer for the next school year, what pieces of information would you need more?
When I'm looking at this accountability table, the federal things are pretty simple to report. I know a lot of people make assumptions that we're dictated to by the federal agency, what we're supposed to teach, but I don't see that here. Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
that is accurate. We have local control over our curriculum plan and how we're developing that. Our measurements are to the standards, so when the state is looking at our student achievement, they'll be looking at it measured by our standards. Federal accountability dollars come to us based on how we're meeting the expectations.
And that's like what percentage are performing at, what percentage of fourth graders are performing at fourth grade level, et cetera, and that's basically how.
And our attendance
Things
rates,
are okay.
our graduation rates, our,
Equitable systems, that makes
exactly,
sense.
yeah, equity is a new factor in the federal accountability. And really that's about our meeting the needs of all learners. And,
Are there any, like weights for that? Like, is it pretty standard across the board, or are we required to look at certain demographics more closely?
yeah, so the ESSA regulations want us to look demographically at all of our subgroups. So, right now, we're looking closely at our students, our Hispanic students, because we've been identified as disproportionately identifying our Hispanic students in the area of specific learning disability. So it gets pretty specific in how they're looking at student achievement by demographic group, and they're looking at that over time. So disproportionality is looked at in over a 3-year span, and if it's exceeded a certain threshold for 3 years, then you're identified as disproportionate. So they do look at the different areas of federal accountability for race, and additionally, we're looking at our students in poverty, and
What are there, you said that the equitable systems, that's a new thing?
so
New for the next school year, 21-22?
new in the ESSA plan for how we are being measured and how it's being, how we're being measured.
Okay.
It's new in the ESSA plan now. However, because of the ongoing pandemic, that information is not publicly released, and also because of the ongoing pandemic, they're not, while we have disproportionality, they're not identifying schools for targeted or comprehensive assistance.
Okay, so are these new requirements, are they gonna impact us resource-wise?
I think they'll impact us training needs and developing understanding in our staff. One of the things that we expect to be in place is that we need to review our curriculum for essentially anti-bias curriculum. And so I expect that to be finalized and in place shortly. So it will, as far as resources, it will impact how we use our time. and then are compensating staff appropriately to do some of that work will be important if they are not 12-month employees and we're asking them to work over the summer, in the months that they're not working. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So resources that way. If we were to find, I have to say the team looking at the language workshop text and the units of study work have really worked to incorporate diverse text within that. So as we're moving forward, I think we've been looking at diverse text and things like that for some time here. So I think we're in a better position than we were previously.
Better prepared. Okay.
And in Mayan and special ed, at DPI, we have these 13 indicators, and like there's graduation rate, et cetera, and that's where they identified the disproportionality of Hispanic students in SLD, but that's not a special ed issue, that's a pre-special ed issue, so that's where we talk about our levels of support that Heidi was mentioning, so it's, that intervention system and how do we identify kids, and if they're learning a second language, is it even fair to consider them as a child with a disability, because we don't know, how they're learning. So we have a task force set up to work throughout the summer to really look at our data and dig down into, the classroom level and how we're educating those kiddos.
And as a result of that, we get to share with DPI in October a continuous improvement plan.
We get
along
to
those
share.
lines.
We don't give it that mark.
That's a nice way, that's a nice way to put it.
So we'll share that with the board before it goes on to DPI.
Okay. Yeah, just whenever there's a change, you gotta consider how it impacts.
And there's specific days during the school year where DPI pulls our data, so, and we know when those are. So it's not, and they don't monitor it year round, there's a winter date and a spring date, so that's what they use to come to those conclusions.
Okay. Okay, I'm glad see that we're prepared for whatever may come.
We tentatively set our next meeting for the first Tuesday in August. And based on the board calendar, that would still be a week prior to the first board meeting in August. Does, look at the date on that, I'm sorry.
Third, I think.
Yes, would August 3rd still work for?
That works for me, that's fine.
And then, time. Do you want to do it at 8 in the morning like this?
I'm very flexible right now. This far out, I can be flexible.
Okay, then we'll set that for 8 a.m. And do we want to consider doing this pattern throughout the year next year?
I'm fine with that. We need another person sitting here though, right?
The committee can run with 2 members.
Okay. The first Tuesday of every month, that works for me. Does that work for you?
I mean, if there's a one-off, then we deal with it at that time, I
Yeah.
think.
We may want to one-off September,
Hmm.
being the first Tuesday will be the day after Labor Day.
Yeah.
Well, it's the day after Memorial Day right now, so.
That's
Right.
true.
I don't care. When do we have, so we don't have a board meeting to the 13th? I have these in here, right?
Let's stick with the first Tuesday then, because you're right, it wasn't an issue for this team, so.
I mean, Tuesday, the day after holiday is still a work day.
Yes.
So,
All right. We'll get that calendar set then. The final document you have in the curriculum plan is the one that you saw last year around this time. It'll need some revision yet, but, and based on what we did and didn't do this year. And then, so the pushing things down the road or doubling up on some, so that final page will be slightly revised when you see that again.
I mean, that makes sense, you're gonna pause all the things for COVID, so.
Well,
We will adjourn at 9:10.